It's filming.
Yay.
We left off on the kidney the other day. We talked about some different variations, but then we dove in to individual nephrons of our kidney. Can you pick that up on the, can you see that on the screen of the camera pretty good?
It's a little low. Like this is low.
That's low, we'll
Yeah.
push down on the handle.
Okay. Oh God. Oh my God.
We're
Okay,
gonna make
there
an
we go.
expert out of you. So we had basically written this and drew that part of the nephron up on the board the other day, and we had labeled these. And we was gonna take off here and kind of review what we had talked about and finish up on the far end with the hormones involved. And what we ended up, we had the renal artery bringing blood in by way of afferent arteriole into the glomerulus. The glomerulus was our first set of capillaries. It is embedded inside the Bowman's capsule. There is where pressure filtration occurs. Pressure is greater in the bloodstream than in the nephron itself, so pressure forces all this stuff out into the proximal tubule. Now, we saw on the board the other day at the proximal tubule level, the kidney is so good at what it does that it takes 60 to 65% of everything we know we need, glucose, electrolytes, water, and shoves it back to the bloodstream. We know we're gonna need glucose later. So back to the bloodstream. We got to the loop of Henle, and we talked about different animals having different size loops of Henle. If they live in arid environments, they have big loops of Henle. If they live in aquatic environments, they may not have a loop of Henle at all, may not need a loop of Henle. But if we had a specialty for the loop of Henle, we would say water reabsorption, conservation of water. We come out of the loop of Henle, we have the distal tubule and the collecting duct. This is the only two portions of the nephron that can be influenced by hormone. There's two hormones. The hormones are aldosterone and ADH, which stands for antidiuretic hormone. Aldosterone and ADH. This is what aldosterone does. Anybody remember my general rule we got to remember all the way through this kidney? General rule. Everywhere salt goes, well, you just remember half of it. You just remember water follows. Water
I
follows.
was gonna say that, but I don't want to be wrong.
It's all right to be wrong in discussion. It's not right to be wrong on the test. So speak up. I need your feedback. So everywhere salt goes, water follows. So aldosterone does this. Here's your definition of aldosterone. It reabsorbs sodium and excretes potassium. It reabsorbs sodium and excretes potassium. So if it's bringing sodium back into the bloodstream, what's going to follow? Thank you. Potassium. Potassium is one of those electrolytes that too much of it will kill you and not enough of it will kill you. So aldosterone is one of our few mechanisms to control potassium. So if aldosterone works on the distal tubule by reabsorbing sodium, ADH works on the collecting duct in allowing water reabsorption. It's just opening the pores, and water's automatically following the sodium that was previously taken back. See how those two work together? Now, when would these work? When would you need these two hormones to function? Nope, not all the time.
When you're exercising, I don't know.
When you're dehydrated or thirsty, which may be after exercise, right? That's when you need them to work. If you're drinking plenty of fluids and everything's working right, they probably don't need to do anything because everything's functioning.
That's when you need those two.
That's when you need those two. When you're dehydrated, low blood volume, low blood pressure, thirsty, all these different mechanisms are gonna start kicking in, so you don't just dry and blow away. We're trying to maintain. All right. All the parts that we've been talking about and have up here on the board are listed on 676. And 677, they tell you some more of the same information that I've been telling you. We said pressure filtration would push a lot of things out into the kidney, but we said a couple of things it wouldn't. You should never see what in your urine? Blood and large proteins. If you have a lot of large proteins in your urine, kidney's not doing well. Could be failing. So, all right, moving on over to 678. They give you a little bit of background. Give myself a little bit of light here because I need light to see. At the bottom of 678, it says, unlike glucose or amino acids, most electrolytes are excreted in urine in variable amounts. Reabsorption of sodium, the dominant cation in plasma, illustrates the flexibility of reabsorption process. The human kidney filters approximately 600 grams of sodium every 24 hours. I would hate to know how much sodium you consume in 24 hours. How about a bag of chips, a small bag of chips? We don't want to know how much sodium's in there.
There's more air than there are chips.
True. That's just the feel of getting ripped off. Chips are going up, so I guess air is really getting costly. I would venture to say we consume more sodium in a day than your body can get rid of. Okay? Nearly all of this sodium is reabsorbed, but the exact amount is matched precisely to sodium intake. With a normal sodium intake of 4 grams per day, the kidney excretes 4 grams and reabsorbs 596. A person on a low salt diet, 0.3 grams of sodium per day, still maintains salt balance because only 0.3 grams escapes reabsorption. But with a very high salt intake, above 20 grams per day, that would be most of us, right? The kidney cannot excrete sodium as fast as it enters. The unexcreted sodium causes retention of additional water in the body fluids, and the person gains weight. The salt intake of an average North American is about 6 to 18 grams per day, approximately 20 times more than you need, and 3 times more than is considered acceptable by those that's predisposed to high blood pressure. What would high intake of salt have to do with high blood pressure, hypertension? Y'all can talk to me.
Doesn't it contract the blood vessels or something?
No, I don't think there's a constrictor capability to it. It has something to do.
Dehydrate
You have
them?
too much water?
Yes, it's right. Yeah, it's where salt is, water will follow. So if there's more salt in your system than should be, it'll hold more water. You increase blood volume. And if something is constricting the vessels, that just doubles the problem, because the body will try to react to it by dilating the vessels to reduce pressure, but there's only so much dilation we can do. So with increased volume, we have increased pressure. And that in itself would shut those 2 hormones down. They're saying we don't need to conserve, we need to get rid of. And so we have a natural diuretic called atrial natriuretic peptide that's actually produced in the atria of the heart that should tell your kidney, get rid of some of this, there's too much. I wonder sometimes if these things really work. Either that or we just like to take a lot of medicine, because I need to get rid of some extra water. You can buy water pills on the shelf at Walmart, can't you? A lot of mixed pills, I call them mixed pills. Midol has a Lasix built into it, you know. So you got pills that has different components to it that covers multiple problems. We're just multifaceted problems, what we are. So we buy one pill, fix all, right? It's our favorite thing to do. But I think we got the idea about salt. We intake too much, and the more we intake, the more we're gonna hold on to water. Now, how could we turn that around and help promote the body to get rid of that extra salt? You're doing it. Drink more. Drink more water, which would make you pee more. The more you drink,
The more you pee.
thank you. Finishing my sentences. I've got about 2 people that's thinking like me right now, so I've got to promote this. They mentioned on 678, the aldosterone, and they get into a system. I'm not going to dive into this system real deep. I'm going to tell you about the system. I'm not going to make major test questions over it, but I will tell you this. When you take physiology, we will make a big deal out of this. And it's called the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. Say, well, aldosterone, we know what aldosterone does. That's at the far end. Everything else got to happen first to trigger. So renin is secreted by the kidney. The kidney sees more blood than anything else, right? So let's say we have a low blood volume coming through the kidney, where the pressure's low, it's on the low end. The kidney says, man, we need to build some volume here. We need to up our pressure. So it produces renin. Now renin comes from the part of the kidney, there's a lot of capillaries here, called the juxtaglomerular apparatus. There's your mouthful. If you can swallow that one. So the juxtaglomerular apparatus produces renin. Renin's secreted to the bloodstream, and it flows through the bloodstream, and it converts a plasma protein called angiotensin, angiotensinogen, into angiotensin 1. Now, angiotensin 1 circulates the bloodstream till it enters the lungs. When it enters the lungs, an enzyme converts it to angiotensin 2. Now, the enzyme, well, these scientists got brilliant minds come up with these names. You know what they called the enzyme? They called it ACE for short. ACE stands for a converting enzyme. So, brilliance going on here. But ACE converts into angiotensin 2. See, we haven't even got the aldosterone yet. Angiotensin 2 does one thing immediately, and we need an immediate response. It causes vasoconstriction. Would that not increase blood pressure if we constrict a lot of vessels? We get immediate vasoconstriction, and then it goes to the adrenal cortex where it tells aldosterone to be produced. Then aldosterone causes the kidney to reabsorb sodium, which will cause us to reabsorb more water and build volume and pressure over time. Now, y'all look like a bunch of zombies after that little story. It's quite a deal. I mean, and I gave you the light details. You could get into the chemistry aspect of it and talking about these amino acids come off of angiotensin 1, and that's what makes it angiotensin 2 because the enzyme breaks these off, blah, blah. I don't even care about that. I just want to kind of understand it and make sure it's working. You know, so we don't worry about the chemistry. But that's how intricate our bodies can be. Other animals, especially mammals, run similar situations than we do. Yes?
What if people, like a lot of my residents where I work, they're on dialysis?
Mm-hmm.
What about that? How does that happen in them if they have dialysis?
Because of the kidney situation. I've got a good friend that could probably answer that better than myself, but he works dialysis. I know there has been cases of where they've drawn blood just to check renin levels, if the kidney's doing it or not, and possibly add renin if they need to. Most of the dialysis situation, they do everything for them. Everything comes out and they put back in what they need. I mean, when dialysis gets finished, your blood is squeaky clean. When your kidney is finished, well, it's never finished because every minute it does something different. It may keep this minute and get rid of it this minute. That's just that's how precise your kidney is. You can't stay on dialysis like that. You go in for dialysis, depends on how bad, once a week, once or twice a week. You better get a bunch while you're in there, or you'll be back in 30 minutes, see? So it's not a perfect situation, but it has created life. When I say create life, they'll be on their deathbed, and within 2 or 3 months, they're actually walking out of the clinic again. And it has restored kidney function. So sometimes the kidneys start failing for whatever reason, and then they start back up after dialysis takes the load off of them for a while. So who knows? I wished I could answer that better, but I will say this friend of mine got the job at the dialysis center because in his interview, they asked him, why do you want this job and what do you know about kidneys anyway? It was almost a smart aleck interview question. He blurted this whole thing out, and they said, when can you start? Because they don't even know this. And when he runs things by the doctors like, we ought to check renin level. Well, there's 2 different kinds of renin. There's one that's the digestive enzyme in cattle that curdles milk, and then there's renin here. And when you start running this by doctors, they start listening to you as a nurse thinking, they know a little bit about what they're doing. So pay more attention to them. So, you know, these are things that depends on what field you're going into. They got him a job. In fact, he decided he got tired of that and went to another job. They hired him back as fast as he wanted to come back because he does do pretty good at what he's doing. All right, so we made it through that for the most part. I'm not trying to overwhelm you, just want you to understand basically what aldosterone's doing here. We'll grow into the rest of it, hopefully eventually. The tubular secretion they're talking about and water excretion, just keep in mind that the kidney will excrete anything in excess, and it's very good at it. If you drink a lot of water, it's going to excrete a lot of water, right? What if you take a vitamin and you don't need all that vitamin? It's gone, right? You've seen your urine change colors if you're on vitamins. That's the extra you didn't need. Anything in excess, it'll get rid of it. The loop of Henle, they called it the countercurrent multiplier. We talked about that the other day because we did salt, 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 water, 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 water. And so it counters salt with water. All right, takes us over to 681. And at the first paragraph on 681, they give you information that I threw out at you the other day. Like we can concentrate urine 4.2 times that of blood osmotic concentration, a camel 8 times. They have in here a gerbil 14 times, and their Australian hopping mouse only does 22 times. I have another book that says 25. Does it really matter? 3 little percentiles, no, it doesn't really matter. It's pretty extraordinary what they can do though. So the next topic in this chapter deals with temperature regulation. In southeast Oklahoma, do we not deal with temperature regulation in ourselves?
This state is bipolar.
Do what?
I said this state
Oh,
is very bipolar.
it's crazy. You go out western Oklahoma and you'll thirst to death, and it's 110 degrees and it feels like 90 here. You come here and it's 90 and it feels like 110 and you can't breathe. And it's all because of humidity, and of course, if there's no breeze and you're sweating like a pig and water's dripping off of you instead of becoming evaporated, you're not getting a cooling effect. You hear people getting heat strokes. You get heat strokes because you can't regulate your temperature. Happens a whole lot more here than it does out west. Out west, they'll just get dehydrated. Not here. Heat stroke. And that usually not good results come from that. Animals have to deal with this as well. You know, if you're a long-haired dog, maybe shaggy-haired dog, would you rather live up north or right here? Yeah. If you lived here, it's like, please cut my hair, right? Are you not cooler if your hair's up or short? Me, this is long summer cut for me. when it gets cut, it'll be even shorter. In the wintertime, I might grow it out a little bit more. I don't know why, I don't have much up there anyway. So, endothermy and ectothermy, looking on page 682. They give us some big time terms here. The first term they give us, zoologists often use this term, called poikilothermic.
I'm sorry, I messed up.
I see that.
Thought about 1 o'clock fast.
Poikilothermic, body temperature that fluctuates with environmental temperature. Do you know an animal that has a body temperature that y'all pass the money up, cause I bet he'd show up, y'all. We had a bet going.
It says 20 minutes.
Yeah, I said 20 minutes, he's like 35 minutes.
Oh, so it didn't fall, I don't get money cause it didn't fall in 20 minutes?
No.
Kill it. Name an animal that their body temperature is totally reliant on the temperature around them.
Polar bear.
Snakes. This time of year, especially as the nights cool, it cooled down pretty good last night. A lot more than the temperature said it was going, or the weatherman's only job you can have
It's kind
to be
of
wrong.
like 65 degrees this morning.
It was cool, which was nice. But this evening, you may see a snake out on the road, or you may, they start finding warm places that hold heat so they can pull from it, because they're going to start getting lethargic, So a snake is a poikilothermic animal. It's an animal that totally relies upon the temperature around it for its own body temperature. Now, the homeothermic, or constant body temperature, regulated independent of environmental temperature, as alternatives to cold-blooded and warm-blooded. Now, we would be the homeothermic, warm-blooded animal. We commonly call a snake a cold-blooded animal, but at 2 o'clock today, if you find a snake, he wouldn't be cold-blooded, would he? He'd be warm-blooded today, but if you find him on December 31st, he'd probably be cold-blooded, wouldn't he? So it just depends. So a little switch in terms here. We know what cold-blooded's in reference to, but now you're going to say, snakes are not cold-blooded. They're poikilothermic. And somebody think, you lost your mind.
Makes you sound smart.
Exactly. Is that not what education's about? So you can throw some terms out there and say, yeah, I got educated at Carlisle. What is it? Jethro Bodine made it through the 6th grade. He can cipher more than anybody. Y'all never watch Beverly Hillbillies? Okay, so all animals produce heat from cellular metabolism, but in most, the heat is conducted away as fast as it's produced. And these animals, the ectotherms, an overwhelming majority of animals belong to this group. Body temperature is determined solely by environmental context. So, ectotherms and poikilothermic are very, very similar, almost one and the same, is what they're saying. Endotherms and homeothermic are one and the same. We produce heat within to maintain a temperature within. Endotherms. A few animals in the animal kingdom, birds, mammals, as well as a few non-avian reptiles and fast-swimming fishes, and certain insects that are at least partially endothermic. Now we look at fish. Does fish not pretty much take on the temperature of the water around them? They usually do. And our fish, when does do people think the fish are going to bite more in the spring and summer or in the winter?
Spring and summer.
Spring and summer. Warmer water, they're more aggressive, they're more alert. Well, just the warmer water's got their metabolism up, so it makes them hungry, so they're going to feed more. So that's the whole idea. Now, does that mean fish do not feed in the winter? Not at all. They're going to feed in the winter
They just stay closer to the bottom.
at some point. Not necessarily. Depends on what kind of fish it is.
Catfish are there belly out in the mud.
Yeah, but that's catfish.
I like to catch trout a lot of times since they live in cold water anyways.
Yep. And they're going to stay pretty close to the surface no matter what. Trout will. How ectotherms achieve temperature independence. Ectotherms cannot control their body temperature physiologically. Many can regulate their body temperature behaviorally by considerable precision. Ectotherms often have the option of seeking areas in their environment where the temperature is favorable to their activities. So desert lizards, they list there. Where do you think a desert lizard goes during the day?
Under a rock.
Gets out of the sun, doesn't he? He may have a burrow or just finds shade somewhere. Metabolic adjustments on 683, temperature compensation, involves complex biochemical and cellular adjustments. These adjustments enable a fish or a salamander to benefit from almost the same level of activity in both warm and cold environments. So they make modifications. Now, this one here in temperature regulation and endotherms, here mammals have body temperatures between 36 and 38, somewhat lower than those of birds. The typical chicken temperature is 106. We're 98.6. So larger mammals and cows like 101.5. But if you checked a black Angus cow at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on July the 14th, her body temperature would probably be 104.5. It would be significantly higher than normal. And she's not necessarily running a temperature. Does that black hide not absorb? It absorbs heat, doesn't it? And she's got a pretty big surface area, so at night when temperatures drop, she would dissipate that heat back down, probably to normal or maybe slightly below normal. Cattle don't have the capabilities that some animals do to drop below normal at night and give most of the day just to get to normal, so they don't have but just a short time frame that might go above normal. See what I'm saying? So temperature regulation of these endotherms, a bird or mammal can control both processes of heat production and heat loss. If the animal becomes too cool, it generates heat by increasing muscular activity, shivering. And decreased heat loss may increase its insulation. If it becomes too warm, it decreases heat production and increases heat loss. Pretty cool to be able to do that. Let's look at this adaptation for hot environments. Of course, we've already mentioned, like the desert lizard, it probably comes out more at night, hides during the day, kind of controls the environment specific environment that it's living in, and not get out in the direct sunlight and dehydrate. Kangaroo rats, very similar in their environment. We already talked about all their water comes from the food they eat. 10% is free moisture, 90% is metabolic moisture. And then in the last of that paragraph, we get into what they call the African eland. They have a picture of it there. What this African eland, it is a light colored plumage. The hair on it's kind of a tan brown. And this light colored plumage helps reduce heat intake, but living in the extreme environment that it lives in, by the time the end of the day comes around, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 degrees higher in body temperature than what it should be. And to not get much beyond that, it employs panting and sweating. We see dogs panting all the time. Now, dogs don't have the eland's ability to sweat, and most animals like the eland really can't sweat. But this one can. And so as nightfall comes in, he continues this until he gets body temperature back to normal, and being an arid environment, the night gets really cool. He'll actually drop his temperature 2 or 3 degrees below that of what is normal for him, this eland. And so when the heat comes back the next day, it may take more than half a day just to get his body temperature to normal. And now he employs the sweating and panting, finding shade, water, whatever he can to add to this. So at the end of the day, he's not more than 1 or 2, 3 degrees at tops above normal. Now he goes back through it again. So that's just adaptive. It's adapting to the hot environment. If you can't adapt to that, then obviously you probably won't be living there very long. Animals don't live in places they can't adapt to. That's what it comes down to. If it's so hot that they can't even reproduce in this environment, then that species will become extinct in this environment at some point. So that's the evaporative cooling, sweating that they're talking about there. Now, on 684, says they even help conserve feces or conserve water by concentrated urine and very, very dry feces. And then as we adapt to cold environments, I think we can relate to this in the wintertime. How many of y'all like it really cold? That's me. Like, you want your house in the summertime to be like a refrigerator.
It would say about 60-65 degrees year round.
Yeah. You know, my son, he keeps his house like a refrigerator. And his wife grew up in an environment that her mom was real cold-blooded, so she kept the house a little bit warm, even in the summertime. Literally, everybody else in the house was sweating. And she's like, I'm freezing to death all the time now. My son said, I got an education so I could pay for electricity so I could be cool and not be miserable my whole life. Of course, he grew up with me. We had like a refrigerator in the house. My wife would have 3 blankets on. He and I would be comfortable, you know, so. But that's it, you know, everybody's different. Now, that will change at some point. There'll be a point at which my wife will be hot all the time and I will be cold, and it's because I'm old and have poor circulation, and she has gone through menopause. So those things will come, that adjustment will happen. We just have to prepare ourselves for it. So, in adaptation for cold environment, you ever been so cold that you shiver? I mean, that we're trying to maintain body temperature. Have you ever feel your fingers freezing off? I mean, they're so cold, they're numb. Your toes, your ears, tip of your nose, you ever see it just get really cold? You can feel it. I swear my nose is frostbit. It'll fall off tomorrow, it's so cold. You ever been out in temperatures like that? Well, that's our ability to adapt. And what your body's saying, just like it does with dogs and anything else, what your body's saying is we need to maintain the internal organs. So we're going to shunt all of our blood to your inside. We're going to keep your heart and your kidney and your liver and your lungs. We're going to keep all them going. We're going to take the blood away from your fingers and your nose and your toes and your ears. If they frostbite and fall off, you're still alive. That's how it looks at it. So you're missing an ear. You're still alive. You ever seen animals lose? I mean, I've had animals lose tips of ears, tips of tails. I mean, it happens. That I had one bull that barely had ears. They was all froze off. But when I sold the bull, I guaranteed the customer that bull would produce calves with full-fledged ears. The genetics were there. It just got froze off, you know. Of course, he thought it was funny, and he bought the bull anyway. But that's how we adapt. The calf didn't die because it froze. It lost some ears and survived. The bull couldn't hear, but it could still hear. So adaptation, we decrease conductance. In other words, we try to reduce loss of heat, so we send it internal. Fingers and toes may get cold. We increase heat production internally. You know, intake of food would do that. Muscle augmentation, get up, move around, always helps. Utilize some energy. Shivering, they list, and then they list non-shivering thermogenesis. This is burning of extra fat. If you've got an energy store somewhere, we're going to burn it to maintain body temperature. So non-shivering thermogenesis. And then he actually mentioned these little mice, or we're going to use mouse for an example, a subnivean environment. A subnivean environment is one, let's say there's 3 foot of snow. There's 3 foot of snow here, and would it be better for that mouse to be on top of that 3 foot of snow or underneath that 3 foot of snow? Much safer underneath. A mouse on top of snow, it's like, come and kill me. Some predators all over that. But it's still amazing what foxes and wolves and some of them, 3 foot of snow is nothing. They can detect that mouse. And I was watching a documentary the other day with this fox cruising along there, and he smelt a mouse, and he started tracking it. All of a sudden, he jumped straight up and nose dove, and he come out with it. He knew exactly where it was at and nose dove into the snow. And all you could see was his tail sticking out of the snow until he backed out. But still, yeah, it's safer than being on top of the snow. He would sure enough he'd have been dead it'd have froze him to death. Because the subnivean environment, you think below ice has gotta be cold. We ought to try above the ice when wind chill is -40. Which one's warmer? If it didn't make any sense, Eskimos wouldn't live in ice, would they? Blocks the wind, provides insulation, it makes no sense, but it does make sense at the same time. Animals figure this stuff out, and they make it work for them. So that's a subnivean environment. Adaptive hypothermia in birds and mammals. Endothermia is energy expensive. I mean, it does. We have to consume food sources constantly to maintain temperature. If we run out of food and we run out of shelter and body temperature continues to fall, obviously, we're gonna die. I mean, things are gonna shut down. We have to maintain that. Birds deal with it in a different way. Birds are highly energetic. I mean, give you an idea of metabolism of some birds. A black-capped chickadee. You ever heard of a black-capped chickadee? Well, y'all gonna have to research that. Somebody's gonna have to do a bird report. A black-capped chickadee comes through here often in the wintertime. It's around here. They're a little bitty gray bird, and they obviously have a black hat on, black cap. This bird at resting condition has a heart rate of 500 beats a minute. If he's moving around, it jumps to 1,000 beats a minute. That's some serious metabolic requirements in it. And a lot of birds are like that, and that they gotta constantly consume food to hold their level of metabolism. So what do they do at night? They can't consume food at night. It's dark, they're shut down, birds only see color, they don't move around at night. There's a few, but. So what do they do at night? Say they only had a few seeds in their craw at best when they went to roost at night. And they need that high metabolism. What are they gonna do?
Regurgitate it and eat it again.
Regurgitate it and eat it again. We're gonna cough it up. Well, I mean, it's in the craw, so they can be digested through the system at that point. But they actually go through what's called a daily torpor. Daily torpor is while they're sitting there on the roost at night, they lower their overall metabolism to have very little energy requirements at night. And they build their metabolism as they wake up the next morning and take off looking for food again. So they go into a pause mode, if you will, a lull, if you will, that lessens requirements. I mean, these birds, their lifespans are short anyway. So if they didn't, we'd just go out there and fall them off, see them all, they fell off the limb dead, laying on the ground because they can't feed. But daily torpor, look into it. And then we get into hibernation. Name a hibernating animal.
Bear.
I knew you'd say that, the reason I asked the question, and you're absolutely wrong.
The skunk.
Ants.
Ants?
Yes. Did you know?
Not one on me.
I've not researched an ant, but
Because they have to save all the.
if I were guessing, I'd say no hibernation for ants, because in the middle of the winter, if it's a warm day, I see them out. But they will try to go deeper in cold weather. True hibernation is where they simply go in for so many months, and their metabolism is so low, if you tried to find heartbeats on them and respiration rates, they would almost be non-detectable. That's true hibernation. A bear does not fit that. Now, up north, yeah, they stay in their den for a long time. Down here, may not. You know, we have quite a few bear around here now, so. In the hibernation aspect, they list ground squirrels hibernate, jumping mice, marmots, and woodchucks. Prepare for hibernation by storing body fat. After a series of test drops, they've got their body fat stored up, they find their den, they go in their den and they start napping, and they do a test drop, and metabolism gets low, and then they may bring it back up. and then drop it down, may bring it back up. They may do a series of test drops until finally it stays there on that test drop, during which body temperature decreases a few degrees and then returns. The animal cools to within a degree or less of ambient temperature. The respiratory rate decreases from a normal rate of 200 breaths per minute to 4 or 5. And the heart rate from 150 to 5. This is probably on a ground squirrel or something they're talking about. During arousal, a hibernator both shivers violently and employs non-shivering thermogenesis to produce heat. So stored up energy has to be used to generate their metabolism back to normal when they come out of hibernation. Now, this book tells a story, or it used to tell a story. In fact, they list a list of animals here that are not hibernators, that they thought to be hibernators. They're prolonged sleepers. Kind of like us, we like to prolong sleep, don't we? Bear, badgers, raccoons, and possums enter a state of prolonged sleep in the winter. But here's the difference. Little or no decrease in temperature and heart rate and respiratory rate. If the weather's nice and they're hungry, they may get out and go find something to eat. Well, there's a lot of studies done on bear here in Oklahoma, and some neat things that we've discovered about them that we really didn't know. But let me tell you, they do talk about it right here. They're talking about a scientist that, and this is a biologist, that actually thought bear were hibernators. So he found a bear hibernating in his den, and dens around here may be a hollow log or underneath a rock where you can actually see the whole bear. I mean, we don't have big dens around here. So in this particular case, it talked like he crawled into the den, and I mean, it may be pretty much a crawl space as it. Crawled into the den and was going to take the rectal temperature of the bear to see. Well, he barely escaped with his life, and he did not escape with his rectal thermometer. He discovered quickly that that bear was not hibernating. Because a true hibernator, in theory, it would take him a long time to actually wake up from the process, and he would have time to take temperatures, take vitals, and may not even wake him up doing that. That's a hibernator compared to a prolonged sleeper. So they called him a reckless biologist, narrow escaping with his life. So I would not recommend that, but I will say when they do studies on cubs, and they have several collared females in Oklahoma, that they see how many cubs they have and how often they have them, and they can track them down, and they back and forth. We work with Arkansas a lot on these female bear, and in the wintertime when they go to den is when they have their cubs, and when they want to go weigh these cubs and see the size of them, how many, they tranquilize the female. I mean, she's alive and well, she's highly functioning, but female bear will lose the pads off their feet in the wintertime, and so as the pads start growing back and they come out of the den, they'll just make a few circles around the den trying to toughen their pads back up. Well, that's just enough for the little ones to follow them a few circles around the den, and as pads get tougher, they range a little more, then they range a little more, then they range, and by then the little ones are ready to fall. So it's all in perfect sequence of what has to happen. But they're very awake, very much awake. They use a tranquilizer on the female to even survive that. And then there's a few animals that goes through what's called estivation. Estivation is a summer sleep. This is the one we should opt out on a few times, last 2 or 3 summers before this one for sure. In this state, breathing rates and metabolism decrease when temperatures are high, food is scarce, and dehydration threatens. Some examples of animals that estivate are land snails, blue land crabs, African lungfishes. We haven't got to the fishes yet, but we'll be talking about the African lungfish. Desert tortoises, pygmy mice, and Colombian ground squirrels. Not a lot of estivation going on around here, but there are animals out there that do go through estivation. All right, any questions there? Our next chapter is 31. 31 is a fluid chapter, a circulatory chapter, internal fluids and respiration. They combine respiration and cardiac all in this one. And with that process, we'll be they're hand in hand, so we're gonna talk about them both together. Now, we said the kidney sees most of the blood at any given time. The heart's doing the pumping, obviously. And of course, without respiration, the heart really doesn't have what it needs to transmit or to pump the oxygen. That's what I'm getting to, is the oxygen. So that's why both of these are thrown in here together. It says the heart pumps through arteries, capillaries, veins, about 5 liters a minute. Your volume of blood in your body is basically pumped every minute, until by the end of normal life of the heart has contracted some 2.5 billion times, pumped 300,000 tons of blood. When the heart stops its contractions, life also ends. It's a hard thing to look at, to think about, but while we're still alive, think about how amazing it is to do that much work in a lifetime. They didn't say, did they say how many years? They really didn't say how many years. Average lifespan of a human, what, is about 70 now? 68, 70, used to be about 65, it's up a little bit. So they're probably basing off 65 to 68 years there, calculating that. So that in itself is pretty incredible. Mark that page right there. I think we're gonna quit with lecture today. We're gonna retreat upstairs, so if you need a bathroom break or whatever, we're gonna go to 319, start our lab. Lab takes a little bit of time, there's nothing hard though. Before everybody leaves, we will go over the questions at the end of the lab to make sure we're all on the same page, okay? Punch the red button.